Whoo-wee. That is smooth. Like, you know what? It's smoother than butter. Welcome back to the channel. I am not dead. I have been busy. In between the last month or so that there's been no content, I have been working on my shop. As you can see, all my walls are mudded, painted, primed, everything. They're done. Walls are done. And I am so happy. But I've been missing the Mopar content, the Mopar work. So I'm out here, and what I started doing here is I started polishing my crankshaft. Now this is a forged crank. This is an excellent crank to have in the build that I'm doing here. And we're going to get onto the block here in a little bit as well too. But this is kind of what we got going on here. We're doing this here at home, old school. And yes, it requires shoelaces. So what I got done here is I got the crank set up just in this little stand, nothing fancy, but just so I can move it around easily, but it doesn't continue to rotate. And what we're going to do is we're going to be taking these crank journals down, and also where the connecting rods go on, and we're going to bring it down to this mirror finish. Now this isn't completely done. This here is at my second stage. I still have a fine metal polish that I want to put to finish it off. So these are the tools that we're working with here. Of course, we got our gauges. We'll talk about a little more about those later. Got to have shoelace or skate lace. The big fat ones are the best. Got a toothbrush, some pipe cleaners. Our paper, we're going 800 grit. Then we're going 2000 grit. And then when to finish it off, we're going to be going down to actually an 80 micron, which would be a fine finishing polish. It actually feels like grease almost going on there, but it should end up finishing these off to like a mirror finish. So the first thing I've done, because this crank's been sitting for a while, and I did lube it up and clean it up before I put it away, I've just gone over and each section as I work on it, I've just cleaned all the grease off it with my paper towel. And then I've gone through with my toothbrush and I've cleaned the inside edge here just to make sure that nothing is stuck in there. And I'm going to do that the whole way along every journal as I work my way through this crank. I just want to make sure there's not a grit in here. And that goes for something as simple as the drywall dust. When I was doing my work, I did have this wrapped up. I got a cloth here that I wrapped it up in. But I just want to make sure that this is as absolutely clean as possible so I'm not introducing any other grit to that unit. So now that I got it cleaned, toothbrush has been in there. I know there's no chunks of dirt. I've also turned around to where the holes are, the lubricating holes that come up and go to the crank bearings as well too. I've made sure there's nothing big just sitting there in the edge that it might get in. So I've taken my sandpaper here, starting off at 800, and I've cut this into a strip just big enough to fit on the size of that bearing seat where it's going to ride on that journal. And I've used WD-40 as a lubricant. So we're going to lube up the bearing face, we'll lube up the sandpaper, we'll kind of wrap it around it, and I'll get my shoestring and I'll show you how that works. So once you get everything clean, using WD-40, just gonna soak that a little bit just to get it around there. We want to make sure we have good lubricant on the sandpaper. This is wet, dry sandpaper, either or, it don't matter. Then I'm gonna take this, I go over the garbage can, and I soak it down as well too, just to make sure that we're not sanding on this dry metal. Then we take the sandpaper, we're just gonna lap it around gently, just like that. And hopefully we can get it to stay. I get my shoelace here. This takes a little bit of work to get this moving. It doesn't just happen. It gets stuck a lot, but you'll get to a point where you'll get a nice rhythm, you know, the right amount of pressure to push on it, and it'll start turning. And actually there, it's perfect there. So what we'll be doing, I got some, you know, fairly good tension on it, not a lot, but we're going back and forth. And we do this, I'll do it for a couple minutes, wipe it off, a couple minutes, wipe it off, and I'll check it. as I'm going. Now also what I've done is my big book of Mopar, the Bible. I've got the exact size of these journals. So what I've done is I'm using feeler gauges at a 20 thou and to set my micrometer here and make sure everything's perfect. And then I've set this to the proper number of turns out, so it's the exact size of my crank journal. Now I've gone through and I have checked them, and it's just snug. So what I've done is, this isn't the smallest measurement, it's not the biggest measurement. I've taken it right in the middle of what my book says, and it's just barely snugging over it. Now this one here that I've already done, it basically just falls right on there. There's a little right there, you can see it kind of sticks for a second, but it falls right on. So I am right in the middle of my tolerances with more than enough, which will be perfect, and I'll work my way across. So once I finish this up with the 800, then I move on to the 2000. So once we've done the sanding, we've gone through and wiped it off with a paper towel. You can see kind of where we start. You get the dark spots, and there's some little rub marks, of course. They're all the same, they all have about the same amount of wear on them. But when we're done, this is like butter. Man, it's smooth. Like I said, smooth than butter. Now you can see a couple little spots, maybe where there's some moisture and this dark edge. Well, this little spot, that could have been a little rust spot. There's absolutely nothing there to feel anymore. This little dark edge though, this is common. This is going to be on all of them. So what it is right to that edge where that line stops, that's where the connecting rod sits. That's where the bearing rides on this one. Same as the connecting rods. They don't fill the gap completely. This little black dark spot you see here, this is actually a raised edge. This is carbon and sludge deposit because the connecting rods ride on each side, but they don't actually touch in the middle. They might come together once in a while, but they don't actually touch in the middle. And with the crank journals, it's the same way. The middle bearings are pretty tight, especially because they have a thrust bearing on the third. Which one is one, two? Third one is a thrust bearing, so it actually fits fully tight. The one that goes on the end of the snout where it goes out the end of the engine, or the block, it does have a little bit of space, and also the one on the back here has a little bit of space as well too. So on the edge there will be a line when I'm done. But anyway, it's going to take quite a while. I'm going to go through this all 800, 2000, clean it all up, make sure everything's clean. And then what I'm going to do is these little cleaners here, these little pipe cleaner things. You get these at the dollar store. They're about as tough as a hard toothbrush. That's what I'm going to use to clean all my oil holes. Now these oil holes on your crank journals, this is where the oil pressure from your engine goes through this hole, and then it goes up into the connecting rod bearing and helps lubricate it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run these through. We'll see if we can get a view here. Where are we at? There you go. You can see it goes right through the other side, diagonally, right through the lobe, counterweight, right to the other side. And we're just going to use those with a little bit of brake clean first to clean out any greasy deposits, and then we'll run them through with WD-40, and then finally just push it through with a clean one of them, get some of that WD-40 out, make sure there's no chunks left in there. And then when we're finished, we'll coat all this in cat's ass. Now I don't know if I've actually had this on the channel before, but it's kind of like a glorified WD-40. Cat's ass. Soaks in the metal like a freaking sponge is what it says. But this stuff actually leaves a nice sticky layer of oil on it. The propellant evaporates out of that, and what's left behind is a nice thick sticky oil that will keep this protected until this crank is ready to go in the engine, and then I'll end up washing it all down again. Of course, one final check before I drop that in. It's kind of hard to get the camera in here when I'm doing this, but once you get the rhythm and you got that nice tension on there, you can really work it. Now, I'm on the 2000 grit now, and you can see I kind of move the shoelace back and forth as well as I'm going, just to make sure I'm getting close to the edge, making sure I'm getting all surfaces with an even pressure. And we're just doing it I'm doing about 2 minutes ago. So we'll take this off, I'll take a look, and see how we did. All right, and there it is. Now keep in mind, we are only on the 2000 grit. There is still the compound, the polished compound that I'm going to use to finish this off, and that comes in probably about, probably close to 4000 grit. So it's going to feel literally like rubbing soap on there. But this is turning out great. Now these here, they all start off basically the same. You can see the little, not really rust marks, but they're dark spots from sitting so long and a little bit of moisture in the oil. But it ends up turning out darn near perfect. So anyway, it's going to take a little while here. We'll bring you back when it's finished. There we go. The crank is finished. That turned out absolutely perfect. Now you can see it's like a little cloudiness and like little speckles. That's just the oil. I gave this thing a little coat of oil here, just now that it's down to perfect metal, just to make sure it doesn't rust. And I've gone through and I've cleaned up where the seal rides on the front and on the back. Now they're like a ribbed thing. It's like a really roughly finished surface. It's a double lip seal, so it doesn't really fit that tight. Most engine weep a little bit. They'll be a little bit wet in the front and a little bit of dust. If you ain't weeping, you ain't working. Just as long as it doesn't leak. But anyway, this is the main cleaning of this crank. I do have the super fine metal polish that I'm going to do, and it is somewheres, it's over here. Yeah, right over there somewheres. Anyway, I don't even think it's worth my time to find it or look for it. I think I'm just going to grab another one at the store. It's only like $9 for a little tiny. It seems cheap, but it is a small little tub of polish. And that'll bring these down even better. That grit, I think, is 80 micron, so it's not even a grit. It's actually 80 microns. It feels like butter almost. It's smooth, but it should turn these things basically into a mirror. But anyway, that's it for the crank. Now let's show you what else we get over here. Isn't that a beautiful sight? My block. She's decked, bored, honed, and repaired. She had a little bit of damage to her. The right side rear cylinder kind of make out this little bit of ring here. That's because that's a new sleeve. They had to punch that right out and press in a new sleeve because the cylinder was too far gone. There was actually a crack inside there and a little bit of rust at the top that was just too deep. And they also found a crack in the side of the block as well. So on the left side of the engine, you can see here where there was a repair. That was a crack. Now it was probably an inch shorter than it was. They go past it a half inch on each side and they drill out the block. And then they use these little, I don't know, they're malleable cast plugs. So they work these things, they kind of drill them into the crack and they work their way along and they kind of squish themselves together and they keep pounding them in and twisting them in until they can finally get it to stop, and then they clean it off when they're finished. And then of course they pressure test the block and everything was good. Now while I had it into the shop, I got them to put in all the frost plugs. They put in all the oil galley plugs. Well, actually that one's for a temperature sensor there. But they put in all the oil galley plugs here on the ends. They're in the sides here. And I also got them to put in my cam bearings because one, I don't have the tool to do it. And two, I really didn't want to try. It's not something I wanted to learn. And there is a bit of an art to it, but they all look pretty good in there. So we turn this engine back around right side up. The cam bearings, some of them have oil holes, some don't. And the biggest thing was that this hole here fits into this galley here, which is part of the oil channel. It is not dead center. It is actually off a little bit. So it was good that he noticed that and knew enough to do it and had the proper tool to set these in, because this bearing on the outside here, this little, where you see right here, this is the biggest. And as they go down the block, they slowly get smaller and smaller and smaller, just to make it easy for you to put your camshaft in there. And you can see the oil hole in that one and that one. And there's also one down there in the back. And of course it's plugged off with the cam cap. So this engine block is done. It's decked, so he took 10 thou off each side. It was a 60 thou overbore, which it did require. Other than that cylinder, the second one here that I thought was good, there was a ring groove in it where that ring was sitting, and it had to go down to that 60 thou. But other than that, everything turned out great, and I'm well within the thickness and the tolerances of these walls. Now the only thing, other than painting this, because I am going to paint it, the only thing left that I have to do with this, I'm going to make myself a little, like a flappy disc out of that 3000 grit paper, and I just got to clean out the holes where the tappets go. Now that'll be getting, once this thing is done painted, before I do my final clean, I'll do that. But that's the only thing that's left to do, is because I see he oiled the cylinders, but I don't see any oil in here, and I can't feel surface rust, but it is, it's out in the elements. It's bare steel in the elements, so there's going to be a little bit of surface rust. So I'll take the 3000 grit, probably wrap it around a pencil or something, put it in my drill and make it like a little flappy bit, and just zip, zip, zip all the way down and finish those off. And then that block will be finished. And I'm waiting on parts. I got bearings in the mail, I got gasket kits in the mail, I got main bearings and connecting rod bearings in the mail. So hopefully things start getting in here. Crank is basically done. A camshaft, though, is like non-existent. I don't know what I'm going to do about that at the moment. Every single supplier I check with is back ordered for the size I want. So I'm hoping something will change here soon. I've been on the waiting list for a month and a half, 2 months, so hopefully something will come up soon. But anyway, that's the update I got for you, and that's what's going on. Sorry it took so long to get a video out, but hopefully things will start moving along here smoothly. It was a hay season. I did a run of hay, not real exciting. And like I said, literally watching paint dry is what I've been doing for the last 2 weeks. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Thanks for the new subscribers that have joined here in the last couple weeks. I noticed I got another 25. Keep them coming. Thumbs up, subscribe, tell your friends, and join the ride. Hope you guys have a great night. Talk to you again later.